Welcome to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. This is the kitchen in our house, and I got to be honest, me and my wife can't stand this fake cherry vinyl wrapped thermofoil stuff. It's just garbage and it breaks down, so we want to mix it up. I was going to build shaker panel doors, but I think repainting them is going to be the cheapest, quickest, and easiest method. So if you have these kind of doors, this is what's going to happen. The thermofoil or vinyl is going to start peeling, especially around the stovetop and oven and maybe your coffee maker. So we want to get this done right. We just don't want to paint right over it. The first step is to peel all that stuff away. All right, guys, so I'm going to show you how to properly take off this vinyl or thermofoil. And like I said, the reason we're redoing our cabinet doors, repainting them, is because this is what happens when they start heating up or getting old. The glue starts kind of failing and it'll just start delaminating. So what you don't want to do is you just don't want to pull this, yank it off and rip it, because what you're going to do is you're going to start pulling up all the fibers and you're going to damage the MDF underneath it. So here's the right way to do it. Grab a heat gun. This one's like a freebie from Harbor Freight. I would suggest not using a hairdryer, your wife's hairdryer, because you're going to burn it up and you're going to end up buying her that nice new fancy one. So grab a heat gun and start right at an end. And as you can see, it starts pulling up. That's what you're looking for. So get on a corner and you'll see this start to bubble up here. That's when you know it's ready to go. Pull that up, come to this side, let it bubble up. That corner, warm up the glue, that's what you're looking for. And then when it's pliable, you pull that corner up. Alright, so the trick, like I said earlier, is not to just grab this and rip it off. You will damage the MDF underneath it, and when you go to paint, it's going to look like crap. So keep it intact. We're replacing countertops, so I'm not worried about the heat gun. So just work it as one entire piece. You can see it start to bubbling up. You know it's ready. You come in this area. And all I'm going to do, I'm not going to pull it off. I'm using the weight of the door to hold down the door while I just kind of hold up equal pressure and it comes right off. You just want to stay a couple inches ahead of it. When you get to the corner, you gotta kind of use your hand to flip it over it. And it should come off in one piece. So that's what you're looking for. Now, don't touch the top of this because the glue is super tacky. So if you touch it and pick your hand up, you're going to get these glue kind of volcanoes and mountain ranges, and it's going to be more of a pain in the butt. It's going to look like crap after you paint it. So let it cool, just move it in someplace nice, let it cool. But if you come check it out, I don't have any damage from yanking that vinyl top off, and that's what you're looking for. So we didn't know if we wanted to keep the knobs or put on handles on the doors. So I'm just going to go ahead and Bondo all the hardware holes with all-purpose Bondo. This stuff's great because it doesn't shrink. With these small of holes, it's not going to crack, and it's easy to sand. So when you're putting this Bondo in, go ahead and shove some down in that hardware hole, and then leave some protruding out of the top of the hole. That way you don't have a dip, and after you sand it, you won't have to add more Bondo. So after it dries, 15-20 minutes later, go ahead and get a sander. I had 220 grit sandpaper, and I feathered out the Bondo and blended it in with the MDF. So take your time, because if there's any high or low spots, it'll show through the paint. So just keep at it until you got it to where you want it. After you sanded down the doors, go ahead and get a blower and just blow all the dust and debris off the door, and make sure there's nothing left on this door before you put the primer down. Once I had enough doors prepped and ready to paint, I went ahead and I pre-staged them in this Wagner spray tent. It keeps my garage really nice and clean from overspray. And I'm going to be using this Wagner paint gun. I believe it's the 4000 series. And then here's the primer I'm going to be using. It's the Valspar stain blocking and bonding primer and sealer. I'll put 2 coats of paint on them. And for a good laugh in between work, here's Brody. No, I promise he's not dead. He's just that lazy and won't even move for the robot vacuum. All right, I'm going to show you how to mix this paint for an air sprayer. Now, this Valspar Cabinet oil enriched paint says use it in an airless gun. I don't have an airless gun, but I'm going to live life on the edge a little bit, and I'm going to try it out. And I'm going to show you how to mix it. And here's the proof that it works. I already have 2 coats of primer and 2 coats of that Valspar Cabinet paint, and these things are just primo. So here's how you're going to do it. Get you a little can of paint. I put about 200 milliliters in there, straight from the tap. Go a little bit at a time. So get a paint stick, mix it up. You can always add more paint or more water, so don't be afraid of it. Mix it nice and good. This paint out of this can is like freaking molasses. So I could tell you it won't shoot out of my gun. And what I look for when I'm mixing this paint, and what's worked for me, is if you get close, I kind of do the strip test. And if you look inside here, when I pick it up, I don't want it to create a mountain on top of itself before it displaces. So I need to add a little bit more water. I just know my gun, so. And I think total I've probably only added an ounce, if that, to 200 milliliters. So we'll mix it real nice and good. And I'm gonna look for those ridges on the surface of the paint when it drips down on it. I don't wanna create mountains that slowly disperse in the paint surface. I just want it to look like not as thin as water, but yep, and I think there we go, we have it. So I'm not creating any mountainous ranges. It's just blending in as soon as that paint is dripping on the surface. So I know it's going to work in my gun. So throw that in there. Put it in my paint gun. Oh, like I said, I'm living on the edge. All right. So with this stuff, you want to do 2 light coats. You don't want to put a heavy coat on it. I did follow the directions on that one. So I'll go ahead and spray a light coat, wait 8 hours, and then I'll spray a second light coat. So on this gun, there's a couple things I'm going to adjust. I'm going to adjust how much paint gets fed into my gun with this knob, and then on my blower I can adjust how much air is blowing out of that compressor, right? So I typically have my blower all the way on high, and then I'll adjust my paint feed knob on the sample board, which I'm going to show you in a second. All right, before I start painting, whether it's priming or laying this paint, I always have a little test piece. So you can see it's white on both sides because I've been either putting primer or paint every single time before I lay it down, because my water is never perfect, right? I never thin it perfect, so I always got to adjust it. But that's fine. It only takes, a minute. So since this is all white and I can't see the paint, I just got a Sharpie and I drew some squiggly lines on it. So when I do my test and adjust my gun, I'll see how I'm painting. So here's what I'm aiming for. I don't want enough paint coming out where it's going to drip as soon as I spray it, and I don't want too little where it's not going to get good coverage. So you want it wet, but you don't want it dripping wet, and you just don't want it dry, right? If you have too little paint, it's gonna dry, it's gonna feel like chalk. Too much, you're gonna have those drip lines, it's gonna be uneven. So practice, adjust until you get it right. Another thing that I do every time I use this paint gun is I wear a mask, a respirator, so I'm not breathing all this crap in. I won't do it just for this quick minute for demonstration, but I always do. So I got my pump set on high. It's gonna get loud for a second, but I'll show you. If you can see the glossiness on it, right? That's a little too much paint. I gotta turn it down some, but coverage is good. I mean, it's a good amount of paint down, but in some spots, maybe I'll go a little slow. I mean, I'm not a professional. I'm not using a professional gun, so I'm gonna turn the feed rate down a little bit and give it another shot. All right, so I'm much happier. I mean, you can still see the Sharpie mark, but we're not trying to make it disappear. I just want to know that I'm spraying good coverage on the sample piece. So I'm much happier after I adjusted my paint rate down a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and paint a light coat of paint on all these cabinet doors that I already have primed, and then I'll show you the end result. One other key tip, have a wet rag handy. Because it's the hot air, it's air that's blown out, but it is hot from the compressor, so the paint will start to dry on the nozzle. So after I paint a door, I'll point it sideways and I'll just wipe down that little nub of paint, and so I have a nice spray pattern for the next door. So keep that handy, put my mask on and start up. So I might have the laziest dog in history, but I definitely don't have the laziest wife. She's been a tremendous help throughout this whole project. So what we did is we scuffed all these cabinet faces with 220 grit. We put 2 coats of primer and 2 coats of that enamel cabinet paint. And here is what it looks like. We got to let it dry for 8 hours. And I'll put the hardware back on and hang some doors when everything's done drying. All right, so that's the last piece of hardware on these top cabinets, and it's been like a solid 4 days of just hammering them out. This is going to wrap up part 1 of the budget-minded kitchen remodel in our home. So I got 2 coats of primer, 2 coats of that enamel paint, we picked out these knobs instead of doing handles like we originally thought. And now we're going to start on the bottom probably tomorrow. We got a ton of drawer fronts, a ton of bottom cabinet faces to do, or doors I should say, and then this whole side. So a lot of work to do. Then we're going to demo the countertops, install new ones, and then we're going to do the backsplash, but that's for the next video. And just for a sneak peek, we went to a box store and we found the backsplash we're going to do. It's this natural stone. It kind of matches the beach theme of our house, so we really like it. But it'll go back here, and I think we hammered out what kind of countertop we want. So if you like this video, please hit that like button and subscribe, and stay tuned for part 2 of the budget-minded kitchen remodel.